She was rubbing on his woody. He like, is it creamy, is it pudding? Off with her clothes, he was pulling. She like, wait, I got something to tell you. I'm a trans woman. Bitch, I secure you. Man, bitch, bitch, I don't even know who the real you. This is why I'm finna drill you. Heart full of hate. Anything you wanna say before I let this Glock spray? They said, see, this the reason I ain't say shit. I'm scared of the violence. I don't know how you was gonna take it. I know it ain't an excuse. I know it ain't gonna change shit. This situation is strange, but let me explain it. I struggle with identity and fear being girls. The truth never set you free. I know there is some blood.
What frustrates me is that this is a cis man's perspective. From a cis man's perspective, this transgender woman within his narrative struggles with identity issues. A trans woman who recognizes herself as a trans woman, who describes herself as a trans woman, is not struggling with identity issues. She knows that her identity is trans woman. But of course, for a cis man who's confused about how a transgender woman would identify or how they could identify, would believe that they struggle with gender identity issues, right? That's not the phrasing of a transgender person. That's the phrasing of a person who's viewing a trans person through a transphobic lens. It was self-serving, right? Again, this narrative, this idea that, oh, his dick is so good. This straight man is so desirable to me that I'm gonna risk my life. I knew it was self-serving because of the dicks that I could suck tonight, I needed to suck this guy's dick because I'm desperate. It pisses me off because I go through my phone right now and show you all of the men who want me to come over and suck their dick, right? And they like trans women. They actually do like trans women, and they got big dicks too. Some of them be suckable, right? Why do you think that of the dicks that are thrown at transgender women, yours is the most important? Yours is the most coveted. It is such an insulting premise that it really is based on this very dehumanized understanding of who transgender women are. So the rapper YG recently released a visualizer for a song called Tiffany. It's a song about a transgender woman, and it started a lot of conversation on social media. I saw a snippet of this song on TikTok and shared my reaction and went on a very long rant that had some people saying that I had misunderstood the actual intent of this song. This is a song that includes a story about a man who takes a transgender woman home and discovers that she is transgender. And from what I am told, it is apparently a affirming story meant to build empathy for transgender women. That is not what I feel because I have been around for examples of things like this happening. I am 35 years old, and as a transgender woman, I've seen this topic come up time and time again. And one of the things that I'm always stuck with is what I know is the reality of myself and how I navigate the world romantically as a transgender woman, and the fantasies that many have for transgender women and the way that they are supposed to navigate romantic life. I understand that circumstances like this happen, but the fact that I personally don't do this, and I know so many other transgender women who do not personally do this, is aggravating to me because our realities are not often understood or respected. In a culture where we don't have a lot of representation, it is frustrating when cis people choose to represent us in ways that feel inherently in bad faith. But I've not heard or seen this entire thing, so in this video, we are going to be giving it a review, and I'm going to be giving you my thoughts.
On this night, Chris met Tiffany. Tiffany was at the club wearing Tiffany. In the middle of the club, they played Central C. And that's how they met. I guess it's meant to be. Tiff came to the table, asked for a drink. Chris was like, you a baddie, so it's good with me. They went shot after shot as he lit the tree. Drinking like they ain't trying to have memory. When Future came on, she liked my song. Popping ass, Chris like, I gotta get her home. Cardi B came on, she started showing thong. Like, hey, with her tongue out, she in that mall. Chris in that zone, he was trying to roll. Drunk off the lick, he was trying to score. His homies wasn't ready though. His homie met a bitch with ass that wiggle like jelly though. So they stayed. More liquor got chased. Drunk and high, they was in the days. Chris like whatever Tiff want, okay. Tiff thinking like I found my bed. And this chick that Chris knew walked up. Tiff knew it too, but Tim tried to hide her face. She looking at Chris like, don't do it. Tiff looking at the bitch kinda sideways. Like she getting weird. Chris see, but he drunk, his vision barely clear. Tiff like, let's go, let's get out of here. Chris drunk, if he drive, he probably hit a deer. Fuck you, bitch. Yeah, bitch, fuck you. All the commotion made him sober up. They told him his hoes was fighting in the club. Chris like, nigga, fight for what? That one my hoe, we ain't never fuck. His homie like, I don't know this shit a dub, but the bitch was for sure trying to tell you something. Huh? Nigga, tell me what? Shit, I don't know. No, nigga, tell me what? They Chris like, fuck that, we gone. With Tiffany, tell her ass, come on, come on. We got a long drive home.
I'm just pausing to get the story together thus far, okay? So they're at a club, right? They meet each other. They get along. They have a good time. She's twerking. She's sewing thong. She's sewing thong. And they are on their way out. But on their way out, there's a woman, presumably a cis woman, essentially trying to go and give Chris some information, right? Tiffany, who's being duplicitous, of course, is hiding her face and is confused why this woman would want to run up and have some conversation with him, right? And of course, they leave the club together. That's what's happened thus far. So Tiffany is inherently duplicitous in this narrative. She is aware of why this woman would want to say something to this man, right? Instead of being honest, she goes home with the guy that she just met, who she got along with. Okay? I just want to make sure I understand the story. Okay, let's keep going.
Soon as Tiffany got in, she fell asleep. Chris driving laid back in his seat, thinking, how he finna beat through cheeks? Thinking, she ain't know she met a freak. Finna get his girl all technique. Then he pulled up to a street, woke Tiffany up like we made it to the crib, girl. This why I live, girl. I'm here to get, girl. Yeah, give you something in your ribs, girl. I've been waiting all night for this, girl. Come a little closer, give me a kiss, girl. Damn, you look good biting on your lips, girl. Put his hands on her hips like, do you know how to dry stick, girl? Kissing and touching. 3 in the morning, Chris was rushing. Chris pulled his pants down, she was blushing. She was rubbing on his woody. He like, is it creamy, is it pudding? Off with her clothes, he was pulling. She like, wait, I got something to tell you. I'm a trans woman. Bring your bitch, where the fuck you going? Bring your mother right now. You said you was a what? Voices in my head telling me to leave him dead. I've thought about it, I got money on his head. Fuck that, I'm trying to walk down my man's tonight. Click, clack, bye, might pull me a trigger just like that. Bye, murder me, let go some pre-sales, making hoes bigger than I. You done fucked up and you ain't got you in your lies. See you 35 and finna meet this 45. Hated Jesus in me is sin, take it slow. But the demon in me is saying, take your soul. Tonight I think the Jesus in me is gone. So the demon in me is finna take control. I'm in a pickup truck with the shovel in the back flat. 21 shells plus, bust nigga blackjack. You dead wrong and still alive, I'm finna get at that. If the cops pull me over, they gon' catch me in the act. Gripping on this Glock while I'm sweating in my palms. Pressing on the gas as I cite just for some songs. I got voices in my head telling me to leave him dead. I've thought about it, got money on his head. Fuck that, I'm trying to walk down my man's tonight. Click, clack, bye, might pull me a trigger just like that. Bye, murder me, nigga. Two pre-sales making hoes bigger than I.
I had to pause it there because I just checked how long this section was, and it's so long. Apparently, it keeps going. So they get back to his place, and he takes his pants off and she starts touching him, establishing that she's making contact with him before having the conversation with him about being a trans woman, right? So then when he goes to take her clothes off, he gets stopped and she says, hey, I'm a trans woman. Now we withdraw into this sort of happy, joyous song portion where he is fantasizing about murdering, shooting, burying, and getting rid of her body, right? And it's said over this kind of joyous track, right? And I'll be frank with you, it's kind of a bop. I'm not going to lie. I don't hate the song or the video, really. This is kind of a simple video, but I think it's very impactful. The sound design on this is great. I really enjoy the artistry behind this song. I'm going to say that just flat out, right? It's not hard for me to understand how people can listen to this and enjoy it. What I'm here to talk about more so is how trans women exist within this narrative and how that matches or doesn't match to our realities, right? So, this is a scenario that I'll just say for this point is not too terribly impossible. I think the thing that is a little frustrating about this is a story about two people who are deciding to have casual sex. And I don't mean to argue against this idea that certain conversations should be had. That's not the argument I'm making. I find it to be a little interesting how, in a conversation about casual sex, there's not a conversation about our health history, our sexual history, right? These are conversations that are pretty important. The reason why a lot of people don't have casual sex is because they actually want to know the person that they're having intimacy with. To me, a lot of this seems like the natural consequence of pursuing casual sex. Because I'll say this, when I meet men and we have a mutual attraction to each other, one of the things that I do is I don't let them touch me or do anything intimately until I tell them. I've been in situations where I'm at a club, I'm talking to someone, they're already touching me on my waist, or they're grabbing me here, they're grabbing me there. And sometimes it's like I have to be the person who pulls them away and tells them to stop doing that. And if I am interested, I get to know them a bit socially. I don't enter into any sort of sexual connection with them. This is frustrating to men because sometimes people get the impression that because of how I present myself sometimes that I fall into bed easily with men. But that's not the case. I'm sex positive and I'm very picky about who I let see my leopard print sheets, right? So personally, for me, I don't believe in jumping into the bed with anyone. You know, I'm not saying I haven't done it. I'm not saying that I haven't had casual sex. I'm not saying that there aren't times where maybe occasionally that has happened in the past 5 or so years. But typically for me, I like to know the person who I'm having sex with. So if anyone's interested in me in that way, I get to know them at a distance. I get to know them socially. We might acknowledge that there is a mutual something or other, but I don't get close to them until I've seen them and known them. A lot of times this has prevented me from a lot of stuff. There was this dude that I had been in a little bit of a thing with for a little while at the club all the time. He was this biker guy, not necessarily your typical goth club attendee, but maybe that was a sign. We had a really good sort of thing for a bit. And I found out before I was able to tell him that I was transgender, that he was a Trump supporter. I had no clue. Him being a Trump supporter makes me being transgender almost completely irrelevant. Sure, we got along with each other. Sure, we might have liked moments we've had in passing with each other. But at the end of the day, you're not fucking me, I'm not fucking you. All you're doing is interacting with me in the way that you want to interact with me. And sometimes I think men need to realize that a lot of times they're getting caught up in their own objectification of women, right? A lot of times these men will approach women a certain way. Men will just impose themselves on me. And some of those men have been upset when they later find out that I'm trans, but it's like you're getting frustrated with this fantasy that you had about what our relationship could have been, right? We just met each other. We don't know each other like that. You like me. And a lot of times I don't even like these guys back. That's like the weirdest part about it. So many men interpret me being nice to them as me being interested in them. And it's aggravating mostly because when people think that you're trying to fuck them and they think that you're hiding your transness from them, they can create all of these crazy stories. And for me, it just draws attention to the fact that a lot of men do really truly have an entitlement to women. I'm not saying that the scenario laid out in this particular song was the right way to go about things, right? Like, I think, if I were in a situation like this, I would have that conversation before even leaving the club. I would give this guy the opportunity to go and meet someone else, right? Like the trans woman in this situation, that's what I would do. But what bothers me is that this is more of an anxiety that men have about transgender women than it is a reflection of how transgender women tend to operate, right? That's my frustration. I think a lot of the people who they think that this is something that trans women often do, that trans women often go home with men without telling them that they're transgender, right? To me, the problem is the assumption that this is a commonplace experience that would even need to be empathized about, right? Like, yes, there are definitely situations like this that happen. Not going to argue against the reality that that happens. But even more common is that men pursue transgender women, right? A lot of men will approach trans women. A lot of men will approach me knowing that I'm a trans woman and being actively interested in being with a transgender woman, right? That is more common than these men getting these trans women back home with them and then discovering in that moment that this person's trans. Think about it. There have been a lot of situations where a man says that this transgender woman tricked him. And you've looked at that transgender woman and said to yourself, with respect, how did he not know? Right? I'm not saying that sometimes men can't be oblivious, especially with the addition of alcohol in this story. There's a suggestion that this is something that people wouldn't pick up on. But a lot of times these men do like trans women. And a lot of this conversation is about hiding that, frankly. In the situations I've been in, when I tell men that I'm trans before we go back to their place, they're still interested most of the time. Yes, there are men who aren't going to be interested, but they're usually still interested, right? We don't talk about that being the reality that transgender women experience more frequently. Not necessarily that everything that the trans woman in this story did was A-okay, but I'm frustrated by the fact that we don't ever talk about the more common experiences that transgender women have. The more common experience that transgender women have, and maybe I can only speak for myself, is that most of the men who are attracted to us are going to identify as straight. For some men who identify as straight, trans women are like useful sexual tools, right? There are a lot of straight men who, they may be very aware of the segment of transgender women who are insecure, who do need affirmation, who do desperately need validation, who do feel like doing something with a straight man is validating, right? And so those men will find those often insecure trans women, and sometimes they'll play along. They'll pretend that they don't know. And it's all orchestrated to get you into a position where suddenly you're giving this dude who already wanted oral sex, but now it's more of a thing where he's getting this power from you being submissive to him. And that is an experience that most cis men are not able to have with most cis women that they meet when they're out and about. This is something I want for people to really understand. There are men out there who do understand that they are dealing with transgender women and they only want to use them as a quick sexual thing. That is more common than the scenario where a trans woman understanding the danger of going home with a man who likely doesn't accept her and putting herself in a position where she can receive violence. That's not a common experience because we know that that's dangerous. Straight men have this fantasy, right? Going back to what I just said about how straight men will capitalize on their position as straight men in order to get sexual favors from trans women. Some straight men are obsessed with this narrative that they are impressive, that they are exciting, that they are worthy of debasing yourself over. Think about a lot of the conversations we're having right now. So many of them have a basis of men being frustrated with the idea that they've been discarded within our society, right? Like these men, what they thirst for so much is this feeling of being desired for who they are as straight men, right? So what I'm trying to get across to you is that this whole scenario that straight men imagine where trans women are out there trying to trick men, right? You went out, you met a girl, you got along with her, and you connected and vibed with her, right? Up to the point of her doing sexual things to you. That's not a bad experience, right? Did she need to have the correct parts for you to be next to her while she dances to music that you like? That's not logical, right? A lot of these people think that trans women are supposed to reveal themselves the moment a man interacts with them, but that's not realistic. I don't need to tell you that I'm trans just because we're dancing in the same room next to each other. Now, if we're about to go home and fuck, that's another thing. But just because we're hanging out in the same space doesn't mean I need to have a formal conversation with you about who I am so you can measure whether or not I'm supposed to be in your vicinity. No, that's not me being deceptive. That's me existing in your vicinity. I need people to realize the base of a lot of this frustration is entitlement to women's bodies. Again, up to the point of them going back home and having sex. Okay, I get it. But what was the problem with you getting along with this woman that you just met and exchanging information and having that conversation there? I saw a comment today on my page. It was a guy that was like, I exchanged numbers with this trans girl once and she didn't tell me that she was trans until she was texting me. And I was like, okay. But he said, it's a good thing I didn't do anything with her because I would have beat her up. But you just exchanged numbers with her and already you're envisioning being violent towards her, even though she told you. And that's another thing, right? People act like telling a man that you're transgender is going to be the safe thing. But one of the reasons why a lot of times I haven't said it just outright is because sometimes men, when they feel entitled to you, you tell them that shit and they're not going to be, oh, thank you for telling me. They're going to beat you up because they've already developed an entitlement to your body. They've already developed that this should be a relationship that concludes in them having their sexual needs fulfilled. And they're angry at the fact that you just exchange information with them without that being true. It's something that really only makes sense in a context where women's bodies are objectified and men are supposed to have that objectification always properly honored, right? What I wish people would understand is that in our culture, you've created this situation where the men who abuse us, who do harm us, who do murder us, all they need to do is say, hey, she didn't tell me. And suddenly all the violence against us is excused. And I want you to understand that men who attack us know that. And the men who attack transgender women aren't just uniquely angry at transgender women, they're misogynists. It's actually just an extension of their misogyny. At the end of the day, all they're trying to do is find the perfect victim that they can target with it, right? And in our culture, because of this scenario that's been created, trans women get to be ousted in a way where what happens to us is never really seen as happening to us. When men rape and abuse us, it's not quite seen that way, even though that happens. So I wish that people would understand that these things are all connected. And for the people who think that this is all just not a huge deal, I need for you to recognize that these men are usually just getting upset that they aren't going to have access to a cis woman, right? That's what it's all about. And they're willing to be violent about that. Just worth thinking about. All right, let's get back to it then.
So the demon in me is finna take control. I'm in a pickup truck with the servo in the back flat. So the cops pull me over, they gon' catch me in the act. Gripping on this Glock while I'm sweating in my palms.
I got voices in my ear telling me to leave them dead. I've so far they got money on his head. Fuck that, I'm trying to walk by my man's tonight. Click, clack, pow, might pull me a trigger just like that. Murder me niggas who grease shells make like. As he drug his ass from up under the car. Fucked up his jaw, teeth missing it. Fuck her all. Fuck you pleading, fuck me seeing the law. Fuck me being the reason you'll be eating out of straw. I'm trying to be the reason you ain't breathing at all. Yeah, I gotta be the reason you ain't breathing at all. All I'm seeing in my head is you leading me on. And for that, you're finna be dead right here on this farm. Master manipulator, acting like a hoe. You should've let me know. The disrespect is bold. You really let me in all my clothes. I cannot live with this shit. You gotta go. Then he grabbed a Glock 4-5, put in a clip, cocked and heard the click, pointed to her face and everything switched. He like, man, I can't do this to a bitch. What would you do if you was Chris?
Okay, so I just want to point out that in this song, he is explicitly asking the audience to participate in this scenario and give what they would do if they were in that scenario, right? This is the point I was making earlier in this video, right? what does this conversation often lead to? It leads to conversations that conclude that transgender women deserve violence. That's the conclusion that he's reached so far in this song. It's not hard to imagine how that's the conclusion a lot of people are going to reach. So, is this really bringing awareness? Awareness to what? Again, does this reflect how a lot of transgender women navigate through their romantic and sexual lives? No, it doesn't actually. It really doesn't. What it reflects is paranoia that some men have. And I'm sure, because it does happen, stuff like this does happen, yes, an experience that some men do have, right? But if I'm going to give this sort of support, right? The way that people keep saying I'm supposed to read this as a positive, affirming song, right? I need to understand that that's not what this is trying to communicate. It's not trying to communicate a truth about transgender women's lives, right? It needs to be truthful for me to feel like it's reflecting anything useful to me. Again, one of my biggest frustrations with the way that a lot of this conversation goes is that so frequently we don't end up having conversations that reflect reality about what transgender women experience. We don't. We are talking about a paranoia, a stereotype, more often than we are engaging in the reality. And what's frustrating to me, especially as somebody who's been publishing content on the internet for 20 years about being transgender, is that a lot of times our voices are never listened to or censored or considered. People dismiss everything we say as like delusional or like not based in reality. And these hypotheticals are supposed to represent reality for us. And we're supposed to be thankful that he's even talking about it. Where from where I'm sitting, this almost sounds like a song that's being put out to get ahead of a rumor, right? Anyway, let's get to the end of this.
Good fight, might pull me at your wall just like that. Bye, murder me, nigga. Two, three shells making holes bigger than now tonight. He like, bitch, I should kill you. Man, bitch, bitch, I don't even know who the real you. This is why I'm finna drill you. Heart full of hate. Anything you wanna say before I let this Blaque spray? They said, see, this treason, I ain't say shit. They're scared of the violence. I don't know how you was gonna take it. I know it ain't an excuse. I know it ain't gonna change shit. This situation is strange, but let me explain it. I struggle with identity and fear being judged. The truth never set you free. I know the end is some blood. My jaw fucked up and you got me laying in it.
All right, so we're getting into her perspective, and I'm going to call this out immediately. Immediately. I struggle with my identity, right? So this is the part where we're meant to, I guess, sympathize with the trans woman. It's aggravating to me because it's so plainly stupid. So you think that there's a trans woman who exists who is struggling with their identity and is so beautiful, so feminine, so just unclockable in every single way, enough to fool you, right? And somehow, some way, that isn't a person who's sure of themselves, right? Like, I'm sorry. One of the only ways that people often become passable enough for something like this to be a feasible experience is for them to be quite sure of themselves and to get medical intervention to medically change their body, right? That's not someone who is unsure of themselves. That's not someone who struggles with identity issues. That is someone who knows who the fuck they are, right? Like, what frustrates me is that this is a cis man's perspective. From a cis man's perspective, this transgender woman within his narrative struggles with identity issues. A trans woman who recognizes herself as a trans woman, who describes herself as a trans woman, is not struggling with identity issues. She knows that her identity is trans woman. But of course, for a cis man who's confused about how a transgender woman would identify or how they could identify, would believe that they struggle with gender identity issues, right? That's not the phrasing of a transgender person. That's the phrasing of a person who's viewing a trans person through a transphobic lens. So we're going to keep going, but for this to be the part where he's actually empathizing, bullshit. You only think that he's empathizing with trans people because this is your view of trans people. I am 35 years old. As a teenager, I struggled with gender identity issues, but I didn't struggle for very long. And the struggle was really figuring out who I was and where I landed on the gender binary. I found out I wasn't genderqueer. I was just a trans woman. I figured that out when I was in college over a decade ago. Then I started taking HRT. I've been on HRT for about 2 decades now. I'm sure of who I am. I know who the fuck I am. I don't have gender identity issues. Some of you have issues with my gender identity. That's a completely different thing. I know who the fuck I am. I know exactly who I am. That's why I choose to be with men who accept me for who I am. That's why I don't covet men who could never accept me for who I am. And again, for a lot of these men, this is a fantasy that just so happens to, of course, complement straight men. This idea that straight men are so desirable that we would be willing to risk our lives for the opportunity to suck their dick. It is a delusion that really only works because you guys don't know trans people. If you knew trans people, you would know that straight men, we don't have to fight to get them. And this is my frustration. I accept that there are a lot of straight men who don't like trans women. I would actually say that the majority of them probably don't, right? But there are plenty who do. And you can debate about what their identity is. But long story short, they're not unique. They're not special. They're not exciting. When I moved to Los Angeles, I deliberately wanted to date bisexual men. I was like, I'm only going to date bisexual men from now on. Because I was in a 6-year relationship with this man who identified as straight. And I was like, oh, I really don't want to necessarily do that again. I wanted to be with men who I thought of as potentially more inclusive, less uptight, more open-minded. And so I would put in my profiles, I don't want to date a straight man, or I don't date straight men, only date bisexual men. And do you know how many straight men sent me messages being frustrated with me because I said that? There's shit that you don't see when you're not a trans woman that we see every fucking day. By virtue of the numbers, a single trans person who's interacting in a culture where most people are heterosexual is going to get an outsized amount of attention from people who identify as heterosexual. Whether you agree with that or not is kind of a non-issue. It truly is. What I've had to learn in my life, for better and for worse, is that my dating pool is predominantly full of men who identify as heterosexual. For better, in that a lot of times when it comes to my personal way of being, again, I am a straight woman myself, there is like that. So I think this has a lot to do with it. But I have found that when I meet men who are interested in long-term relationships with me, even though I had a season of preferring bisexual men, I tend to get along with straight men. Long-term, in terms of what our goals are in relationships, the roles that we play in our relationships, I tend to resonate more with straight men. And for worse in that, a lot of times I'll go out and I'll get along with someone and maybe we are mutually attracted, but they're straight, right? So while it's possible they could be attracted to me, it's possible they could be interested in me, it's possible that maybe they do like me, I don't have a reason to assume that. Right? So I don't assume that. And again, that's when I tend to observe people from a distance, right? You guys know I'm polyamorous. I have 3 long-term partners. Most of them do identify as straight. Only one of them is a man who I am his first trans partner. We went on one date when he had asked me out to get to know me a little bit. And I told him that I was trans and he did not care. And we've been together for 6 years now, right? I have had to accept that a lot of times if I meet a man and I'm likely to get along with him romantically, it's going to probably be a straight guy. But I've also had to accept that a lot of the men who are attracted to me are straight men. And therefore, sometimes I have to have those conversations. And I have to accept that maybe an outsized portion of them aren't going to be interested in me. But you know what's funny? Being in a season of polysaturation right now where I'm not at all looking for men and not really trying to date men, when I reject men, they get so upset. That's what's so funny to me about this. Men get so upset when I reject them because I think so many men feel they can count on getting me because of who I am. Because I'm a Black woman, because I'm a trans woman, because I'm a curvy woman, right? Like I think sometimes men get offended because they view me as not desirable enough to be able to say no. And I wish that people understood that. That's something that a lot of men who identify as straight, who are part of the dominant class, they capitalize on. And that's so much more of a realistic conversation than the conversation that is trying to be had here. Again, this is a cis man's perspective. This whole song, like the very end, we're at 6 minutes and 34 seconds out of a 6 minute and 52-second video. We've only got like 20 more seconds, right? And we're just hearing the trans woman's perspective. So this whole dance where he's talking about beating her up and being violent towards her and da-da-da-da-da, and how he really wants to, and now that would make sense. That's supposed to be counteracted completely by this last section where maybe the trans woman pleads for her life and says that she has gender identity issues and, you know, da-da-da-da-da. I do appreciate that he acknowledges that one of the realities for transgender women is that they often can't just tell guys because they fear violence. But that's also the same reason why a trans woman like this would not go back home with him, right? And so this is, again, a fantasy where a straight man is envisioning that his penis, access to his penis, is such a prize, is so exciting, so coveted, that this woman who knows that she could be on the receiving end of violence risks her life for the opportunity to blow his penis. It's delusional. It truly is, right? You guys have to understand that there are not very many transgender women in this world who are that passable, okay? So for people to pretend that this is like a common thing, common enough for it to be like a defended point of conversation, is so immensely ridiculous to me. Anyway, let's get back into it.
I'm them, not a girl, not a stud. I just want to be loved. You put your gun, got me nervous. So I knew I was self-serving, but let me go. I believe in God. I'm worth it. Please hold what up, man.
So this whole thing ends with her pleading for her life, saying that she's not perfect, that she has gender identity issues, she believes in God, and that's why you should spare her life. And I'm meant to view this as like a positive thing. No. I misunderstood it, right? I'm gonna be really frank with you. This shit annoyed the living hell out of me, and I'm annoyed that I even gave it a chance because I wasn't wrong. I was not wrong. I was not wrong in what I said. I'm going to include the video that I put up that got people under there saying, oh my God, you get it all wrong, because I know that I didn't get it wrong. And I think the things that I say in this video are relevant. You know what really bothers me about this whole song that YG made about trans women? There are a lot of men out there who actually do get off on being tricked. The reality for me as a trans woman is I don't believe in showing a man my leopard print sheets until we've had that conversation, right? To be frank with you, I believe that I deserve good sex. I believe that I deserve sex that is actually fully satisfying to me. I'm actually not excited by the fact that a straight man is attracted to me and wants to have sex with me, because literally on my way to the train station right now, there's going to be at least 20 of them that try to get my attention. And a lot of you will go back and you'll feel soothed by the idea that no one wants transgender women while these men continuously pursue us and get off on the idea of being tricked by us. I'm upfront about who I am. Go to my Wikipedia page. It's right on the front page, right? But I still have men who are upset with me not having that conversation with them, even when I'm not interested in them. Because ultimately at the core, and this is the core a lot of you don't want to work through, you are functioning under an entitlement to women's bodies. And a lot of men feel entitled to this idea of taking a woman home and having her be exactly what they imagine. And they're treating it as if that is a reasonable, well-adjusted way to approach people. When in reality, if you don't know someone, of course, you're not going to know all of their medical history. Of course, they're probably not going to feel comfortable telling you about their medical history. A lot of these men could choose to not have these like hookups or these quick sexual experiences to validate their masculinity. But instead, they feel entitled to women's bodies and then act as if when the woman's body doesn't turn out to be exactly what they felt entitled to, that was a slight against them. And that's really only a slight against them in a misogynistic culture that believes that women's bodies are owed to men. I should be able to go to the train station without men saying a single thing to me. I should be able to exist in this world without men wanting to consume me and feeling entitled to consume me. But the reality that I have to accept is that it doesn't matter whether or not I'm up front. It doesn't matter whether or not I tell a guy. Misogyny makes men feel as if they can assault me. And if my body isn't exactly what they imagine, they get to kill me and tell you that I tricked them. And that is a far more common reality than a trans woman tricking a guy. I don't need to trick men to get into my bed. I've never needed to be dishonest to a man so that he likes me. Men like me just fine. And that's not even an exciting thing to acknowledge. In fact, I wish I could say that a lot less, if I'm being honest with you. I wish they would leave me the fuck alone. But they don't, because I exist in a culture that feels entitled to my body, even when we're continuously pretending as if it isn't one that men consume. What I know, and many transgender women know, is that there are a lot of situations where we have verbatim been upfront and said to these men, like, hey, I am a transgender woman. And these men will pretend not to hear us just so they can get the experience of having their fantasy realized, where they go and they take a beautiful woman home and she turns out to be transgender. What these men won't tell you is that way more of those men are into trans women than they are willing to publicly acknowledge. Do you know how many times in my life I've had men vocally express disdain towards transgender women and then try to get me to go home with them? It is so common. And honestly, I think the men who make a big deal of this are the men who are into trans women. And they're making a big deal of this to, I guess, not be accused of being into trans women. But in my own experience, when I tell men that I'm transgender, most of them don't care if they're attracted to me. If men are attracted to me, most of them don't care. And there are a lot of straight men who, when I tell them that I'm trans, they're like, oh, I'm not really into it. But a lot of them eventually spin the block. I came out a very long time ago. I've had so many of the men who have rejected me come around and be interested in me suddenly again. Because I'm a woman, right? And so, of course, if they were already attracted to me, they're not going to just stop being attracted to me. And what I wish more men could do is just be disinterested and leave it at that. Leave it at that, right? I think that a lot of these men are egging on our genocide because they know that we're going to eventually tell y'all the truth. And what's frustrating as a trans woman is that, people are constantly trying to tell me that I'm undesirable or constantly trying to communicate to the world that I'm undesirable. But I've never actually had that intimate body experience. Ever. Even when I was a little trans kid. Even before I understood what it felt like to be objectified or what objectification really was. I was dealing with grown-ass men objectifying me. And it's just part of my fucking life. Don't welcome to womanhood me, especially if you're under the age of 20, because I've been out for that long, right? I wish that some of you would just recognize that if you go out into the world and you try to hook up with people that you don't know very well, they're probably going to have something relating to their health that you're not aware of. And some of you could stand to re-examine your entitlement to women's bodies and, frankly, your self-deprecating sexual habits that put you in a situation where you're being intimate with someone you don't know very well. So anyway, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Help me understand if I'm missing it. I don't think I heard anything the wrong way here. I think I'm hearing it exactly the way that it's meant to be heard. This is a story about a duplicitous trans woman who, in his own words and what he's saying she said, right, it was self-serving, right? Again, this narrative, this idea that, oh, his dick is so good. This straight man is so desirable to me that I'm going to risk my life. I knew it was self-serving because of the dicks that I could suck tonight. I needed to suck this guy's dick because I'm desperate. It pisses me off because I go through my phone right now and show you all of the men who want me to come over and suck their dick, right? And they like trans women. They actually do like trans women, and they got big dicks too. Some of them be suckable, right? Why do you think that of the dicks that are thrown at transgender women, yours is the most important? Yours is the most coveted. It is such an insulting premise that it really is based on this very dehumanized understanding of who transgender women are. People view transness as this thing that exists purely for sexual satisfaction. So the only reason that a transgender woman would ever be feminine is so that she could gain access to a man, right? You guys are so delusional. That's not reality. Reality is there are a lot of men, many of them who identify as straight, who actively like transgender women. Like I said, I have 3 partners. My shortest relationship, we just celebrated our anniversary recently. He identifies as straight. Edward identifies as straight. So does Alexander. My shortest relationship is 5 years. My longest relationship is 10 years. There are men in this world who are heterosexual, who like transgender women, who accept that you don't agree with their own sexuality label, who still go and publicly love transgender women. You don't need to buy into this narrative that trans women are eager to have sex with you because you're a straight man. Because frankly, if a trans woman wants to be with a straight man, there are straight men who actively, openly like transgender women. And yeah, they may accept that you don't like their sexuality label, but they don't give a fuck. That's what I find so attractive about my partners. They don't care what you have to say about it. They don't care about your own personal understanding of their sexuality. They know that they're only attracted to women. They know that I'm not a man. And the conversation that they need to have is with me and not with you. Who cares if they're bi? Who cares if you think that they're gay? This gets me, right? All of this is around a man's fucking ego. From the song, from the story, from everything. It's all a man's ego. We're all navigating around a man's ego. I am personally attracted to men who have, first of all, gone to therapy, right? Likely have a vasectomy, because I think it's a good thing to do in this culture, right? I like men who have sat and examined all of the tools of control set out to control them as men and realized that they don't need to bow to the heterosexist culture that controls so many of you. So many of you are so controlled by this idea of being straight and seeming straight and everyone seeing that you're straight and everyone seeing that you're such a big man. That's all this is. Bravado. Oh, I would have fucked him up. You know, what would you do? You know, it's all of this is trying to get people to come together to celebrate a particular vision of masculinity. And it is controlling you. And to me, there is nothing sexier than a man who has examined all of that shit, still recognizing who he is, but also recognizing that he doesn't need to fall in line just because y'all say that that's the way he's supposed to live, right? There's nothing sexier to me than a man who has liberated himself away from that shit. My partners who identify as straight know that you don't agree with that. They also don't care. And that is so attractive, right? So many of the men in these sort of scenarios, right? They should be able to say, you know what? All right. No, thank you. I've shared this story a few times on here, but I had a baffling experience recently where this guy approached me. I was not attracted to him. There's only room for one diva in my relationships, and he was definitely a bit of a diva, not my type. But he was into me, and he started talking about me to people around. Some of those people knew that I was trans because I am a transgender content creator, and people do know who I am, right? And because he had publicly expressed attraction to me, he was upset with me, even though I wasn't attracted to him at all. This guy was not my type remotely, but he made it a big deal because he was attracted to me. And when you really think about that, having experiences like that just makes me really see it for what it actually is. So many of these men just want their egos and their little peckers stroked. That's it. And they want everyone to fall in line and agree that it needs to happen. And I don't bow to that shit. I don't need to explain shit to nobody. You know, I just don't. If I want you, I'll talk to you about it. But what's crazy is I don't want most of y'all. And it's so annoying to me that so many of y'all think I do. Like, I want to be with men who accept trans women as women. I don't want to be with a man who I have to explain myself to. You know, it's this thing that gets me. It kills me that these straight men think I deserve limp dick that doesn't want to be there. They think that I deserve unenthusiastic pumps from a man who's not sure if he's hitting the right spot. Baby, I deserve good sex from men who actually love being there. And it's sad to me that so many of you've debased trans people in your mind so much that you really think that degrading sex from a man who would hate me is more desirable than sex with a man who actually loves being there. You think that trans women are at the bottom of the barrel, scraping up the scraps. And I need for you guys to wake up from that delusion, because it just allows you not to see what's actually happening, right? A lot of you guys are soothed by this idea that trans people are undesirable, and you need to realize that that is a crutch. And when you find out that your partner is on Shemale Yum, jerking it, understand that you are part of the system that made that fetish for him. I'm being dead ass. People reinforce this taboo, and all it does is make us more popular. The interest in trans porn has only gone up as more of you guys keep having these conversations. That's the funny part, actually, is that in the years where people have tried to have these bombastic conversations about trans women tricking men, what's actually happened is more men have started to recognize that they could potentially date a transgender woman. I think that's why I have my boyfriends, right? That's why I'm able to have the relationships that I've had, right? Because more men have started to ask themselves, what would they do if they were in Chris's situation, right? I think the thing that a lot of you don't want to hear is that for a lot of men who have been in Chris's situation, the dick stays hard and the deed is complete. It's not often this bombastic thing, right? When I tell guys that I'm trans, there are some men who aren't accepting of it, but there are a lot of men who don't give a fuck. There are even more men who are actively interested in being with a trans woman. My happy sweet spot with men is men who accept that transgender women are women and date them and are attracted to them in the same exact way that they are attracted to cis women. So anyway, that's what I had to say. I can rant about this all day, but I think I've said enough. Let me know what you guys have to say in the comment box below. I want to remind you guys that there is a sale going on my shop right now. This is going to be one of the last days of the sale, so make sure you guys take advantage of it. As per usual, I want you guys to stay hot and introspective, and always remember and never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.